In this presentation, I will discuss the findings thus far from CRL's preservation certification work with Portico and HathiTrust. The purpose of these audits and assessments is to promote understanding of, and where justified, confidence in digital repositories. The CRL community now includes some 250 academic and research libraries of all sizes and types. These libraries support advanced research and teaching activities that draw heavily upon electronic resources. And collectively, we invest an estimated more than $1 billion annually in access to and preservation of those resources. Moreover, reliance upon digital repositories is an essential part of library strategies to reduce the cost of print acquisition and management. Therefore, information about the long-term persistence of digital materials is directly relevant to our community's due diligence and stewardship. The Portico and HathiTrust assessments are particularly timely. The current economic downturn is forcing CRL member libraries to confront the formidable and growing costs of managing physical collections. CRL also recognizes that libraries must realize the greatest possible return on their significant investments in electronic scholarly resources and digital preservation services, along with the ensuing necessity to move aggressively to reduce the costs of redundant print holdings. The digital certification process supports CRL's hybrid strategy of advancing more systematic archiving of print while enabling the transition to electronic-only formats where appropriate in a careful and responsible manner. CRL appointed a certification advisory panel, CAP, to inform the assessment process and ensure that the interests of the entire CRL community are addressed. Panel members represent the various sectors of CRL's membership, including leaders in preservation, information technology, and collection development. Advisory is the operative word in CAP, as the critical work was led by President Bernie Riley and masterfully carried out by Special Projects Manager Marie Waltz and Technical Consultant James Jacobs, Data Services Librarian Emeritus, EUC San Diego. The general metrics used in CRL's assessments are based on the Trustworthy Repositories Audit and Certification Checklist, TRAC, a set of criteria developed by a joint task force formed by the Research Libraries Group and the National Archives and Records Administration between 2003 and 2005 as a tool for measuring repository capabilities for reliably storing, migrating, and providing access to digital collections. CRL published the TRAC checklist after several test audits funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. The audits include a site visit by Marie Waltz and Jim Jacobs with testing of processes, sampling of content from the archives, a review of the information gathered from independent sources and third parties, including CRL libraries, and a review of documents provided by Portico and HathiTrust. Portico's preservation audit was conducted between April and October 2009, and in January 2010, Portico was certified as a trustworthy repository. The assessment of HathiTrust started in September 2009 and is still in progress. CRL assigned to Portico a level of certification in each of three categories: organizational infrastructure, digital object management, and technologies, technical infrastructure, and security. The numeric rating is based on a scale of 1 through 5, with 5 being the highest level and 1 being the minimum certifiable level. The possible certification levels are fully outlined at CRL's website, but 4 indicates capabilities that are compliant with all TRAC metrics, whereas 3 indicates compliance with all critical TRAC metrics. At both 3 and 4 rating levels, the repository is available to provide complete, up-to-date documentation of major systems and procedures, but with minor inconsistencies that are not likely to lead to systemic or pervasive defects. Please note that this presentation does not cover the many good preservation practices that Portico employs, but rather highlights areas of concern as expressed in CRL's report. The audit identified several areas in which Portico must enhance its operations. If Portico is to continue to be recognized as one of the CRL community's trusted archives of scholarly content, Portico will have to address certain concerns in 3 key areas: organization and planning, scope and integrity of archived content, functionality and services provided by the repository. In addition, the report identifies concerns about future costs and potential risks. I will now offer highlights about improvements needed in each of these areas. Organization and planning. Portico should provide for a succession plan for continuity of operations. This involves identifying a successor organization and disclosing a plan for disposition of Portico archival content, technology, and other assets in the event of discontinuation of the program. Further, Portico must improve internal processes, such as documenting the changing roles and responsibilities of staff and positions over time. Although Portico's infrastructure continues to improve, today the content ingest process dominates Portico operations. This is understandable. Nevertheless, greater attention needs to be paid to other stages in the preservation process, such as maintenance and enhanced preparation for the possibility of a trigger event. Portico is still short of archiving a critical mass of journal content to fulfill its potential as a comprehensive long-term repository. As of October 2009, when the review was conducted, Portico had 83 committed publishers representing just over 10,000 titles. This is still, however, only 50% of the estimated 20,000 plus peer-reviewed journal titles from 365 publishers listed by Crossref. I would urge all CRL members to recommend appropriate benchmarks for what would constitute a critical mass of journal content. A trustworthy repository must make its content available with the context necessary for the intended community to be able to understand and use the information. Portico must continue to identify community expectations and requirements for the functionality or understandability of the archived content. This will involve ongoing research into both the needs of depositing publishers and participating libraries to clarify what their expectations are for understandability in e-journals, e-journal articles, e-books, primary source materials, and so forth. Portico's minimal delivery standards may not fully conform to the expectations of all of its designated user communities. The lag time between a trigger event and delivery of content by Portico, for example, is as long as 60 days per agreements with publishers and libraries. This is likely to be unacceptable in some fields, like medicine, where such a hiatus would have a significant impact on users. As just noted, Portico's agreements with publishers limit their ability to disseminate content quickly in the event of a major trigger event. In addition, the delivery interface that is available when a trigger event arises is currently rudimentary. The impact on Portico price and services of the inclusion of genres of content other than e-journals is unknown. These genres include e-books, digitized newspapers, primary source materials, and other types of databases, which may be less compatible with existing Portico workflows and technologies, and may require new arrangements with publishers and subscribers. Secondly, Portico and JSTOR are both services of Ithaka. This status presents both a risk and an opportunity. Portico's affiliation with JSTOR could become a deterrent to some publishers' willingness to deposit journal content in the Portico archive. On the other hand, the JSTOR delivery platform may offer a viable solution to Portico's post-trigger journal access needs. CRL and Portico have agreed that ongoing certification is contingent upon Portico making certain disclosures every 2 years. These disclosures should describe, for example, changes in content, technology, services, and relations with stakeholders. In addition, Portico must allow a periodic, systematic sampling and inspection of the repository's archive content by CRL or by a third party designated by CRL, using testing processes as determined by mutual agreement between CRL and the repository. Emblematic of the need for ongoing dialogue are the concerns expressed by respondents to CRL's survey prior to this webinar. Some of the issues of continuing concern are the impact on Portico pricing and services of archiving non-journal content, as well as gaining a better understanding of the uniformity of publisher agreements with Portico. Next, I will turn to the assessment currently underway of HathiTrust. As mentioned at the outset, the review of Hathi started in September 2009 and is still in progress. The general sense of the CRL advisory panel is that the shared digital repository, SDR, is developing rapidly and is capably addressing the challenges of technical, organizational, and financial sustainability. While CRL is impressed overall with the accomplishments and potential of Hathi to date, the review has identified areas where further work, or at least clarification, is needed. HathiTrust has provided some useful additional information recently, which is currently under review by CRL's team and will be vetted soon by the advisory panel. CRL hopes to complete the assessment process over the summer. In reviewing the status of the assessment of Hathi, it's important to keep two factors in mind. First, CRL has not yet conducted a site visit, which will help to confirm that appropriate processes are in place. Eventual certification will require that written policies, procedures, and specifications are available. Secondly, the Constitutional Convention scheduled by Hathi for 2011 should further define the governance and funding models adopted. The areas of concern are identified on the screen, and I will now discuss each one briefly. Organization and finance. From the information provided thus far, the panel wants to better understand the long-term sustainability of the collaborative governance and funding structures manifest in HathiTrust. For example, the dependence on such diverse organizations as the University of Michigan, OCLC, and Google to provide Hathi with assets and services. CRL members responding to the pre-meeting survey also thought that understanding Hathi's governance and decision-making was important. It's unclear what factors the pending Google Books settlement will bring into play. CRL will seek more detailed explanation and documentation to assess how Hathi employs their preservation strategies, such as bitstream copying, refreshing, and normalization, as well as where in the SDR workflow each occurs. In the pre-meeting membership survey, CRL members expressed interest in technical information about digital file ingest, enhancement, normalization, annotation, and archiving processes, and the changes that occurred during same. HathiTrust has provided documentation about its system and how it handles data corruption and loss. However, CRL still has questions about the file validation process, which may be answered in the next few months. There are several other issues related to data integrity, which CRL continues to explore with Hathi. Other areas we're trying to better understand include report generation and handling during the ingest process. In the pre-meeting membership survey, CRL members expressed concern about detection of changes, corruption, and loss of SDR digital content and metadata, including fixity checks and avoidance of file duplication or ambiguity. It would be beneficial to the community for Hathi to define the preservation aims and objectives of the SDR with greater specificity, given the broad scope of the organization's mission. How does Hathi decide upon its definition of understandability and define the characteristics of the original or of the ingested digital copy to be preserved? What is Hathi working on to define a certified copy? We would like to understand the criteria they will use for this purpose. Finally, how will Hathi balance the need to preserve fidelity to original characteristics of the scanned objects with the demand for new functionalities that users will desire? It is not clear that the level and extent of quality assurance performed on content ingested by the SDR from various sources is adequate. How does Hathi detect what has and has not been received from contributors of content with reference to the original materials digitized? CRL is also seeking more information about handling of duplicate copies and procedures for overwriting files. It's important to keep in mind that Hathi is still an emerging repository, whose policies and procedures in a number of key areas must be further developed before it can fully realize its potential benefits to the CRL community as a trusted digital repository. I close with some observations from the panel and would like to acknowledge Winston Atkins at Duke in particular for his insights and articulation of some of these general precepts. First, the audit process reveals just how complicated it is to establish a repository, especially for those who go first. Portico received certification as a trustworthy repository, yet the audit still revealed areas in which CRL felt Portico could or should upgrade its services. The complexity of developing a digital repository is such that we must accept that all the TRAC criteria probably will not be met at the highest level, certainly for the immediate future. Third, it's up to each institution to consider the areas in which a repository falls short, then decide whether it can accept the risk posed by those shortfalls. Some will be critical, some will be on their way to resolution, but each institution should view those limitations in the context of the overall certification of a repository. The audit report is one excellent way we have to identify the risks and make that assessment. The designated community's needs play an important role. If it cannot get timely access to the information, as might happen with a 60-day delay prompted by a trigger event, or if it doesn't present information in a manner consistent with the community's expectations, it has not fulfilled its mission. At the same time, the library user community needs to work together with publishers and repositories to develop the standards, tools, and best practices to ensure that digital repositories achieve certification. Collective action, as exemplified through CRL's efforts, will help to move us all forward.